You're sabotaging your spiritual power right now, and you don't even realize it. The awakened ones, from ancient mystery schools to modern consciousness researchers, figured this out slowly through years of struggle, and that's exactly why their transformation is permanent. But here's what they won't tell you. 7 hidden patterns are keeping you trapped in a reality you weren't meant to accept. And today, you're going to understand exactly what they are. This isn't for everyone. If you're still clinging to external validation, if you're still seeking permission from a world that doesn't understand you, this message will feel like a language you don't speak. But if you've ever felt that pull, that knowing that something fundamental is shifting inside you, then you're different. You're one of the few who are ready to reclaim what's been hidden. Let's start with the first pattern that's draining your power. You're seeking validation from people who don't even understand the journey you're on. Every time you look for approval, every time you need someone to confirm that what you're experiencing is real, you're handing your spiritual sovereignty to people who are still asleep. The ancient masters knew this truth. They walked alone because they understood something most never will. The divine doesn't need a committee. Your awakening doesn't require a vote. Think about it. When you experience something profound, something that shifts your entire perception of reality, what's the first thing you do? You want to share it. You want someone to validate that what you felt was real. And the moment you do, the moment you seek that confirmation, you're giving away the very power that was trying to emerge through you. Your spiritual power functions like a battery. Each time you seek external validation, you're creating a drain that pulls energy away from your core. Ancient yogis understood this principle so clearly that they spent years in silence, not to isolate themselves, but to preserve the energetic charge of their awakening. This isn't about isolation. It's about recognizing that your spiritual connection cannot be mediated by people who don't operate at your frequency. The moment you stop caring what others think, the moment you stop explaining your journey to those who aren't capable of understanding it, you activate something that's been dormant inside you: self-sovereignty, the ability to trust your own experience without needing external confirmation. If you've felt this pull, if there's been this growing sense that you need to stop caring what others think, that's not rebellion. That's your soul recognizing its own authority. And when you honor that, when you stop seeking permission to be who you're becoming, hidden abilities start to unlock. You begin to perceive things before they happen. Your intuition becomes surgical. You start to operate from a level of knowing that doesn't require proof. But here's what most people don't realize. The validation seeking isn't just draining your power. It's creating energetic cords between you and everyone you're trying to convince. And those cords, they become highways for the second pattern. Energy vampires. And I don't mean this metaphorically. I'm talking about people who operate at such a low frequency that being around them literally drains your spiritual power. The esoteric teachings have been talking about this for thousands of years. Every mystical tradition has a word for it. The vampiric entity, the frequency leech, the one who feeds on your light because they've disconnected from their own. You know exactly who I'm talking about. The person who always has a crisis. The friend who only calls when they need something. The family member who makes you feel exhausted after every conversation. You've felt it. That specific kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got. That's not emotional fatigue. That's energetic depletion. In ancient Celtic traditions, Druids spoke of energy cords connecting people at the solar plexus. They could literally see these golden threads turning dark and draining when someone operated from a low frequency. Modern energy healers call this phenomenon psychic vampirism, but the mechanism is the same. Your light becomes their food source. Here's the truth they don't want you to know. These relationships aren't just draining. They're designed to keep you from ascending, because the moment you start operating at a higher frequency, the moment you begin to access states of consciousness that most people don't even know exist, you become a threat to everyone who's still operating in survival mode. Your light exposes their darkness. Your clarity reveals their confusion. And instead of rising to meet you, they pull you down. This is where most people get stuck. They think compassion means staying connected to everyone. They think spirituality means accepting all energies. But that's not enlightenment. That's self-destruction. The awakened ones understood something crucial. Energetic boundaries aren't selfish. They're sacred. Protecting your frequency isn't about judgment. It's about recognizing that you can't take everyone with you. When you start setting boundaries with low-vibration relationships, something quantum happens. The space they occupied gets filled with connections that actually accelerate your growth. You start meeting people who reflect your frequency back to you. Conversations that used to drain you for days are replaced by exchanges that leave you energized and expanded. This isn't luck. This is the universe responding to your vibrational signature. But that's just the beginning. This next pattern is harder to recognize because it's everywhere. Mainstream narratives. The stories you've been told about reality, success, happiness, purpose. All of it is spiritual anesthesia. Every single day, you're being programmed to accept a version of reality that was designed to keep you asleep. The news, social media, the education system, popular culture. They're not just information sources. They're consciousness dampeners. The suppressed truths from mystical traditions all say the same thing. The collective programming blocks higher consciousness. Every tradition that taught people how to access divine states, how to perceive beyond the physical, how to activate latent abilities, was either destroyed or corrupted. Why? Because awakened humans can't be controlled. People who know their own power don't need authorities telling them what to think. You've questioned this. You've looked at the official stories and felt something was missing. That feeling? That's your higher consciousness trying to break through the conditioning. Every time you consume mainstream narratives without questioning them, you're reinforcing neural pathways that keep you locked in consensus reality. And consensus reality is a prison designed to look like freedom. But here's what the Tibetan masters, the Sufi mystics, and the Christian contemplatives all discovered independently. Cognitive freedom isn't about rejecting everything. It's about developing the capacity to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them. They called it witness consciousness. Modern neuroscience confirms that this practice literally rewires your prefrontal cortex, creating new pathways that allow you to perceive beyond programmed filters. This is the part where most people resist. They think questioning mainstream narratives makes them a conspiracy theorist. But here's what they don't understand. The biggest conspiracy isn't what's being hidden. It's what's being normalized. You've been taught to see awakening as mental illness. You've been programmed to view mystical experiences as delusions. You've been conditioned to believe that physical reality is all there is. Cognitive freedom is the most dangerous thing you can possess. Because the moment you start thinking for yourself, the moment you stop accepting prepackaged beliefs about reality, you activate dormant wisdom. You begin to see patterns that were always there, but invisible to the programmed mind. Synchronicities multiply. Your ability to manifest accelerates. You start operating from a level of awareness that makes the old version of reality seem like a children's story. But to get there, you have to be willing to let go of everything you thought you knew. Which brings us to the fourth pattern, identity death. The thing everyone fears most. The dissolving of who you thought you were. This is where most spiritual seekers turn back. They want awakening without transformation. They want enlightenment that lets them stay the same person. But that's not how this works. Every mystical tradition talks about the death-rebirth cycle. The dark night of the soul, the descent into the underworld, the ego dissolution. These aren't metaphors. They're describing an actual process where the constructed self, the identity you've been building your entire life, has to die. Not metaphorically, actually die. You're feeling it right now. This sense that the person you were is dissolving. The things that used to matter don't matter anymore. The goals that drove you feel hollow. The relationships that defined you no longer fit. This isn't depression. This is sacred transformation. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly by improving itself. It has to completely dissolve. Inside the chrysalis, scientists have discovered that the caterpillar's body turns into a kind of cellular soup. No structure, no form, complete dissolution. Only then can the butterfly DNA activate and create something entirely new. Your identity death works the same way. The old self must liquefy before the awakened version can emerge. Most people panic at this stage. They try to rebuild the old identity. They desperately grab onto familiar patterns, even when those patterns are clearly dying. But here's what the awakened ones discovered. Surrendering the old self doesn't mean losing yourself. It means discovering who you actually are beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the programming, beneath all the stories you were told about who you should be. When you stop resisting identity death, when you let the old version of you dissolve without trying to save it, you don't disappear. You emerge. The real you, the one that was always there beneath the constructed personality, finally gets to exist. And that version of you has abilities the old self couldn't access. Perception beyond time, connection to collective consciousness, the capacity to operate from pure intuition without needing logic to validate it. This is the sign you've been waiting for. If the person you were is dissolving, if nothing from your old life makes sense anymore, you're not falling apart. You're breaking through. The structure has to collapse before the new foundation can be built. And what's about to be built on the other side of this transformation? That's what most people never get to see, because they turn back right here. But you've come this far. You've recognized the validation trap. You've understood the energy vampire pattern. You've seen through the mainstream programming. You've surrendered to identity death. These first 4 patterns, they're just preparation. The final 3 are where awakened people reclaim their real power. The ones that don't just change your perception, they change what you're capable of. These are the patterns that separate the seekers from the finders, the curious from the committed, the interested from the initiated. You've invested this much time. You've followed this thread this far. What comes next isn't just information, it's activation. The kind of knowledge that once you have it, you can't pretend you don't. The kind of truth that fundamentally alters your relationship with reality itself. The most powerful revelations are in the next segment, the ones they tried to hide. The ones that unlock abilities you didn't know were possible. This is where the real transformation begins. Most people stop here. They recognize the validation trap. They set some boundaries with draining relationships. They question a few mainstream narratives. They start to feel the identity shift. They feel good about themselves. They post about their awakening journey. They feel accomplished. But something inside you knows this isn't the finish line. The awakened few recognize what comes next. The final 3 things aren't just habits to quit. They're the master keys to unlocking the power you've been seeking your entire spiritual journey. What separates those who genuinely awaken from those who just dabble in spiritual concepts? The next 3 patterns reveal where real transformation happens. Thing number 5, peak experience addiction. And yes, spiritual seekers can absolutely become addicted to peak experiences. You know exactly what I'm talking about. That incredible meditation where you felt one with the universe. That breathwork session where you experienced pure bliss. That plant medicine ceremony where the veil lifted and you saw ultimate truth. But here's what the ancient masters understood that modern seekers miss. The chase for the next peak experience is just another form of spiritual bypassing. The Tibetan masters, the Sufi mystics, the Christian contemplatives, they all taught the same essential truth. Integration creates sustainable power, while peak chasing creates spiritual exhaustion. Think about it for a second. You've had powerful experiences, haven't you? Moments where everything made sense, where you felt connected to something greater, where you touched the divine. But then what happened? You came down, the feeling faded, and instead of integrating what you learned, instead of embodying the wisdom, you immediately started seeking the next high, the next retreat, the next ceremony, the next technique that promises transcendence. Sound familiar? It's like climbing a mountain to experience the breathtaking view from the summit, then immediately rushing back down to climb another peak, never bringing any of that expanded perspective back to your everyday valley. The Zen masters had a saying for this: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The point isn't the peak experience. It's becoming someone who carries that mountaintop clarity into every mundane moment. The ancient yogis called this phenomenon spiritual addiction. They recognized it as a subtle trap on the path to awakening. Because peak experiences are incredible, don't misunderstand me. They show you what's possible. They expand your consciousness. They crack open your perception of reality. But they're meant to be signposts, not destinations. They're meant to show you what you're capable of embodying permanently, not just experiencing temporarily. The real transformation doesn't happen in the peak experience. It happens in the integration afterward. It happens when you take the wisdom from that expanded state and weave it into your everyday consciousness. When you don't just have moments of presence, but become a presence. When you don't just experience peace during meditation, but radiate peace while standing in line at the grocery store. Here's the power promise I want you to understand. Integration creates permanent transformation. Peak experiences create temporary highs, followed by inevitable crashes. One builds spiritual substance. The other builds spiritual dependency. The truly awakened don't chase the next peak. They anchor the wisdom from every experience so deeply that it becomes who they are, not just what they occasionally feel. And when you make this shift, when you move from peak chasing to embodiment practice, everything changes. You stop feeling like you're on a spiritual roller coaster. You stop measuring your progress by how high you can get. You start building unshakable inner power that doesn't depend on perfect conditions or extraordinary circumstances. Thing number 6 reveals why so many seekers stall at the same point. Spiritual bypassing. And before you say, "That's not me, I've moved beyond that," pause for a moment. Because spiritual bypassing is the most subtle form of self-sabotage on the awakening path. It's when you use spiritual concepts to avoid dealing with psychological wounds. It's when you jump to forgiveness before you've fully felt your anger. When you preach love and light while your shadow is screaming for attention. When you affirm abundance while running from your fear of scarcity. The mystical alchemy traditions understood this better than anyone. The medieval alchemists weren't just trying to turn lead into gold. They were describing the spiritual process of transforming shadow into light. And their number one teaching? You can't transform what you haven't first faced. You can't transmute what you won't acknowledge. The shadow doesn't disappear because you choose to focus only on the light. It goes underground, where it gains power in the darkness, sabotaging your awakening in ways you can't even see. You've tried to love and light away your darkness, haven't you? You've tried to positive think your way past your wounds. You've told yourself that anger is low vibration, that sadness is resistance, that fear is just an illusion. And maybe in the ultimate sense, from the highest perspective, all of that is true. But from where you are right now, in this human experience, with this nervous system, with this history, those emotions are real. Those wounds are valid. And they're not asking to be transcended. They're asking to be seen, felt, and integrated. The medieval alchemists weren't just mixing chemicals in laboratories. They were describing psychological transformation through symbolic language. Their process of turning lead into gold, that was shadow integration. The lead represented the dense, rejected parts of yourself. The gold was the transmuted power that emerges when you stop running from your darkness and start working with it. They knew that spiritual bypassing, trying to skip straight to the gold without processing the lead, creates what they called fool's gold. It looks shiny on the surface, but crumbles under pressure. The Jungian depth psychologists revealed what the ancient mystics always knew. The shadow contains not just our wounds and our darkness, but also our disowned power, our rejected gifts, our unclaimed brilliance. When you bypass your shadow in the name of staying positive, you're not just avoiding your pain, you're abandoning your power. The parts of yourself you've labeled as negative, as unspiritual, as shameful, those parts hold tremendous life force. That anger you're afraid to feel, it contains your healthy boundaries and your righteous passion. That grief you keep pushing down, it holds your capacity for deep love and authentic presence. That fear you're trying to transcend, It's protecting something precious and teaching you where you need more support. Here's the power promise that changes everything. Facing your shadow doesn't make you less spiritual. It makes you whole. Integration of your darkness doesn't lower your vibration. It creates authentic high frequency, not the fake spiritual bypassing kind that collapses the moment life gets challenging. The truly awakened aren't the ones who've transcended their humanity. The truly awakened aren't the ones who've transcended their humanity. They're the ones who've embraced it so fully, who've faced their shadow so courageously that they've transmuted it into fuel for their awakening. Alchemical integration creates unshakable power because it's built on the foundation of your whole self, not just the parts you've deemed acceptable. And this brings us to thing number 7. Awakening expectations. The specific ideas you have about what awakening should look like, what it should feel like, how it should happen. And here's the profound truth that spiritual masters across every tradition have taught. Your expectations about awakening are the very thing preventing your awakening. Because every expectation is a limitation, every should is a barrier, every this is how it's supposed to happen is a closed door to how it's actually trying to happen for you. The Zen masters understood this so deeply that they developed koans specifically designed to shatter spiritual expectations. The Sufi mystics taught that the seeker's idea of God must die before God can be experienced. The Christian mystics called it the dark night of the soul, that terrifying, beautiful place where everything you thought you knew about the spiritual path dissolves, and you're left with direct experience beyond all concepts. This isn't just ancient philosophy. This is practical awakening technology, because your awakening doesn't look like the Instagram mystics. It doesn't feel like the YouTube gurus described. It doesn't happen on the timeline you decided was appropriate. Your awakening is wildly, beautifully, frustratingly unique to you. Maybe it's happening in the grocery store, not on the meditation cushion. Maybe it's arriving through heartbreak, not through bliss. Maybe it's showing up as confusion and disorientation, not as clarity and peace. Maybe it's taking 10 years, not 10 days. And every time you judge your experience against your expectation, every time you measure your progress against someone else's path, you miss what's actually happening. You miss the divine intelligence, orchestrating your unique awakening in the only way that will actually work for your consciousness, your karma, your soul's particular journey. In ancient Japan, Zen students would spend decades working with a single koan, a paradoxical question designed to shatter all preconceived notions of how enlightenment should arrive. Some found awakening while sweeping the temple floor, others during a simple meal. One monk awakened when he heard a stone strike bamboo. The point: divine timing operates on a frequency beyond your mind's timeline. Your awakening might arrive through heartbreak, not bliss, through confusion, not clarity, through the ordinary, not the extraordinary. What if your unique, messy, confusing, beautiful awakening process is exactly what's supposed to be happening? What if releasing your expectations doesn't mean giving up on awakening, but finally allowing it to happen in the way it's been trying to happen all along? Here's the ultimate power promise. Releasing awakening expectations doesn't make you lost. It makes you available to the intelligence of the universe guiding your path, available to the divine timing that's wiser than your ego's timeline, available to the specific medicine your soul needs, not the medicine everyone else says you should want. Trust in divine timing doesn't mean passivity. It means surrendering your small picture of how things should unfold so you can receive the bigger picture of how things are actually unfolding. And when you make this shift, when you stop forcing your awakening to match your expectations and start receiving the awakening that's actually happening, miracles occur. Acceleration happens, not because you're trying harder, but because you've finally stopped resisting the exact shape and timing of your unique path. This is how the truly awakened recognize each other, not by how closely they match some spiritual ideal, but by how fully they've surrendered their ideas of what spirituality should look like. Not by how much they've transcended their humanity, but by how deeply they've embraced it. Not by how fast they've arrived, but by how willing they are to let the journey unfold in divine timing. This is the ultimate paradox, the final letting go, the surrender that creates breakthrough, and you're ready for it. You wouldn't be here at the end of this video having stayed through all 7 things if you weren't ready. You've stayed through this entire exploration because something inside you recognized these patterns were holding you back. You now understand the 7 invisible forces that have been sabotaging your spiritual awakening, seeking external validation that drains your sovereignty, staying connected to energy vampires who pull you down, consuming mainstream narratives that keep you asleep, resisting the identity death that's trying to transform you, peak experience addiction that keeps you chasing highs instead of building substance, spiritual bypassing that has you avoiding your shadow instead of integrating it, and awakening expectations that block the very awakening you're seeking. And here's what else you know now. Quitting these things slowly isn't weakness, it's wisdom. This isn't about perfection, it's about progression. It's about awareness. It's about catching yourself in these patterns and making a different choice. One moment at a time, one decision at a time, one brave surrender at a time. Some of you will quit seeking validation first and take 6 months to set boundaries with energy vampires. Some of you will release peak experience chasing immediately, but struggle with awakening expectations for years. That's not just okay. That's perfect. Because your path is your path, but knowing is just the beginning. The integration process, that's where the real magic happens. That's where theory becomes transformation. That's where concepts become consciousness. And I'll be here, creating content that supports your unique awakening journey, revealing the hidden mechanics, sharing the ancient wisdom, offering the practical tools that actually work. Save this video. You'll need to return to it as you quit each of these 7 things. You'll need the reminder when you catch yourself falling back into old patterns. You'll need the encouragement when the path gets confusing. Which pattern did you recognize most deeply in your own journey? The validation seeking that's been draining your power, the energy vampires keeping you stuck, the peak experience addiction preventing real integration? Share in the comments below. When you name what you're releasing, you activate something powerful. And when you see what others are facing, you'll discover you're not walking this path alone. You're part of a growing community of awakening beings, choosing authentic transformation over comfortable illusion. If you found value in this video, if something shifted inside you, if you feel more clear about what's been blocking your path, subscribe to this channel. Because there are more hidden awakening secrets coming, more ancient wisdom that the modern spiritual marketplace doesn't want you to know, more practical tools that actually create transformation instead of just temporary feel-good moments. And you don't want to miss what's coming next. The next video reveals what emerges when you release all 7 patterns, what becomes possible when you stop giving your power away. What awakens when you finally clear these blocks? The level of consciousness that becomes accessible, the transformations that start unfolding, the life waiting on the other side of this work. What I'm sharing next will fundamentally shift how you approach your entire awakening journey. This isn't the end. This is the threshold. Your real awakening begins right now, in this moment, with the awareness you've gained and the choice to release what no longer serves your evolution. The journey continues in the next video, Awakened One.